You're listening to stories of discovery and adventure from Adventures in a Tuk Tuk. This podcast is sponsored by the fabulous Tuk Tuk UK, the UK's largest importer of tuk tuks. If you want a tuk tuk or anything tuk tuk related, Tuk Tuk UK is the company to speak to. They love talking tuk tuks as much as I do. Hello and welcome to the show. This week I talked to Neil Lawson. Neil works in the low carbon farming industry with his company GI Energy. They design and install green powered greenhouses to solve serious national issues of food security and agricultural reliance on fossil fuels. But through his life, Neil's other passion is overlanding. I got to know him through my adventures in a tuk-tuk. In 1978, when he was 18, he and a mate hitchhiked across the Sahara Desert, starting in Morocco and making their way through Algeria and Niger to Ghana. In 2000, he and his wife set off on an 18-month epic journey from the UK to Cape Town in Bumble, their converted Land Rover. And more recently, he cycled across Mongolia on a bike, in tweed no less. Nothing odd about that. But let's go back to 1988. Neil was 18 and his gap year lay ahead. I sense you're eager to get back out there. That's the first thing I sense from you. You'd like to adventure soon. Is that true?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's.
What is the next one? I don't know.
Oh, there's always a next one. It's just a thought process, isn't it? Just to get out there. So let's talk about hitchhiking across the Sahara. Now, that is a big place, the Sahara. 11 countries, as big as China. Where did you start? Where did you go?
Well, I was 18, had left school. All my mates were going down to Australia on their year off before university.
Yeah.
I had stayed in England. Actually, I'd gone to university in France for a bit to do French.
Yeah.
I was then working in London with another friend who'd stayed behind. We were sat in the pub one day saying, we can't go to Australia. Everyone else has gone there. What should we do? And this mad idea, let's hitchhike across the Sahara, which we did. And I think it probably took us about 4 weeks to come up with a plan, which was to stick your thumb out.
Yep.
We actually wanted to skip Europe. So we took the train down through Europe. My parents were living in France at the time, so dropped off there on the way to say hello, goodbye.
Yeah.
My mother lived and spent a number of her formative years in Ghana, so there was already a bit of an introduction. I think most parents would be horrified if their 18-year-old son said, I'm going to hitchhike across the Sahara.
Yes, I think they would.
My mother was very much, I'd like to come too. Because her recollection was jumping in the pickup in Ghana and driving up to Timbuktu for a picnic.
Okay.
Which you could do in those days. Anyway, we took the train down through Europe. In Spain, we were on a sleeper train. The police stepped on slightly before Madrid station. I was strip searched on the train. I was arrested and dragged off into the police station in handcuffs with a group of North Africans. And as I went, the friend I was going with, I said, please just ring up the embassy and they'll sort it out. And lo and behold, I was in there. I had been, as I said, strip searched, so intimately searched for hidden drugs and things like that. A phone call came in from the British Embassy. It said, I've spoken to the police. They don't know why they've arrested you. They've agreed to let you go. I said, but why? Surely this is wrong. And he said, this is Spain. I suggest you go.
Yeah.
So walked out. Unfortunately, my luggage was still on the train and the train had disappeared.
Oh dear.
So that had to be found. It had been ransacked. There wasn't a lot of value in there, but I'd lost my camera and things like that. Anyway, that was an introduction as to the civilized part of Europe.
Yeah. What
was Africa really going to be like?
Yeah.
So we crossed over to Ceuta, Tangier, over from Algeciras, was it? Into Ceuta.
Okay.
Which is where the real sort of hitchhiking stuff started. Got pulled into real Morocco.
Yeah.
The market sellers.
Yes.
The £1 a night hotels and things like that got ripped off for a couple of flying carpets.
Right.
Which was interesting. Then started off, probably best to get an atlas, really, because the route we did doesn't exist anymore because Algeria's shut down.
Yes, you cannot go that way now, can you? You can't go left.
No, which is, and one thing I always said was I would love to do that, do Africa under my own steam,
Yeah.
which is what inspired the 2000 trip.
Yeah.
So just having a quick look at a map here.
So you were 18 in. I'm gonna guess here. I could go. This could go horribly wrong. So sort of 1980.
85, 86.
86. Okay.
It was January 86.
Right.
So looking at in those days it was Rough Guide
Yes.
or Lonely Planet.
Yeah.
So I can't remember which one I had, but we ended up going to. We didn't do Morocco proper.
Right.
We stayed in the north coast. We couldn't really travel around. We were reliant on hitchhiking rides.
Yeah.
We went to Chefchaouen inland a bit.
Yeah.
And then we were heading for the Morocco crossing, the Algeria crossing, Oujda.
Yeah.
We got there, and there was, in those days, money was an issue. It was all, I think Algerian money was, they had government fixed exchange rates,
Okay.
which was about half of the actual exchange rate.
Right.
So we did a thing at the border where we did some black market money.
Yeah.
We had to hide it on our person. In those days, it was film cases, if you remember the old roll of film in a case. So we took one of those apart and stuffed a whole lot of notes inside it and put that back in our luggage. Quite pleased with ourselves there.
Yeah.
Then headed across the border. And on the other side, I think it was a bus that we opted to take there. And again, those days you couldn't book anything.
Yeah.
So it was a case of queuing up at this little window in a hall, in a wall, along with everyone else. Being British, we both queued nicely, but the others didn't.
Yeah.
So we lost our tickets. The next day we had to return again.
Right.
This time we had to fight our way to the front, which we did. Got our tickets, but I can't remember where we were heading after that. So ultimately we were going down to Tamanrasset, which was the sort of the Algeria crossing of the Sahara.
Okay.
And
is that with Libya?
No, heading south towards Niger.
Okay. Right, okay.
So from Oujda we headed south to Figig, which was another crossing. From there to Béchar. And at this point we were starting to, it was the thumb out, get a lift in the back of a pickup.
Yeah.
And I had this great image in my mind, because sadly the camera got stolen, of the two of us sat in the back of a pickup with two goats.
Yeah.
Being driven across the desert on a, I suppose, a fairly rough road, a graded road.
Yes.
And the driver just took a left and disappeared off 5 miles into the desert. And we were both looking at each other thinking, help, what's going to happen here?
Yeah.
Is he going to dump us in the middle of the desert and nick all our baggage?
Yeah.
But actually, he took us to his home. And it was the most amazing evening, sitting there under the stars with an Algerian and his family, incredible hospitality, him playing the guitar and just sleeping out under the stars. Next day, we were given a lift back to the road again, where we were dropped off, and we just sat with our thumbs out.
Waiting for the next pickup.
And that was for the next pickup.
Yeah.
But it's culture there that you look after fellow travellers.
Yeah.
So there is no particular concern.
Yeah.
We picked up the next lift, again heading further south. This is probably a journey that by car you could drive in a day or two.
Yeah.
For us, I think it took about a month with our various hitchhiking and things.
So the mainly pickups?
Well, yes, I would say pickups, some public buses.
Yeah.
When we got to, again, Adrar was another major town. And we were looking for, there's a crossroads that we were dropped off at, which we were a bit concerned about because traffic by now was getting a bit light. And there was effectively a water tank, which is a watering hole.
Okay.
So we ended up at this crossroads for probably 24 hours.
Yeah, waiting.
No food, no shop, no nothing, just a watering hole.
Yeah.
Just wondering what was going to happen. We then got a lift on a big truck, modern truck, which was full of dried peas. And because we were starving, I remember putting these peas in the water bottle, trying to hydrate them again so we could have something to actually eat. It didn't really work.
No.
From there, we headed into a place called Insala, which was another fairly big sort of market town on a junction. From there, Insala, heading south, we picked up, there were a couple of large Mercedes trucks. We got a lift on the back of those, and then they parked up at night, and we were offered the opportunity to bunk with the, which was also, I remember this banging on the door at 2 o'clock in the morning where my friend had woken up and the Algerian truck driver was running his hands through the hairs on his chest. And he panicked, got out and said, we've got to leave this, we can't carry on with this.
No.
So we left that lift behind.
I'm not surprised. Yes, that was definitely a wise choice.
Yeah, and there we headed down to Tamanrasset, which is the sort of the centre of the deep south of Algeria, and the entrance to the last bit, which is the crossing over to Inquezem, which is effectively the border with Niger.
Okay.
And for that bit, you're not allowed. It's quite controlled military-wise. There was activity going on in that area, even in those days.
Yeah.
So we had to take an official bus, and here we were again queuing up at a door for a couple of days. Missed a couple of buses. Eventually got onto a bus, and then headed into the true proper Sahara, the Hogar Mountains.
Okay.
And a recollection of that part of the route was there's a stone there, and tradition is for good luck for the traveller.
Yeah.
You need to drive around this stone 3 times before you continue.
Yeah.
That was an oversized minibus with however many people, 30 people in it.
Yeah.
And that got us down to the border town of Inguezem.
Yeah.
Which is the border with Niger.
So it's quite a central route down through Africa, isn't it? Really?
Yeah, it was. So in that time, there were a lot of French who would buy the old Peugeot 504s.
Yeah.
So with 3 rows of seats, and they were known as the desert taxis.
Okay.
So they'd buy them in France, they would drive them down into West Africa and sell them and then fly back.
Yeah.
And that was, and actually there's a film I saw recently, a French film called 4L, which revisits that, where people were buying Renault 4Ls, driving them down through Morocco, Mauritania, selling them into that part of the world.
Yeah, I have a story where we went to Morocco last year, and my first car was a Renault 12, given to me by my father. And the next time I saw a Renault 12 was in Morocco, because there are bloody hundreds of them. You know, that's where they go to die or to have another life. It was quite amazing seeing all these Renault 12s.
Another life, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Renault 12s, Renault 4Ls, Renault 504s.
Yeah.
For some reason, they love them there.
Yeah.
So from the Niger border, I mean, these are dusty old towns. We ended up, and from memory, we got to Agadez, which is the capital. My memories of Agadez are they had a zoo.
Yeah.
Which probably had a few emaciated animals in it.
Yeah.
Hiring a bicycle where the tyres were just tied together bits of rubber, not pneumatic at all.
Oh dear.
And the old pull rod brakes and things like that.
That's not very modern at all. No.
Not very modern, but great for that part of the world.
Yeah.
Relatively bulletproof.
Yeah.
We then did a deal with I think they were either Italian or Swiss puppeteers.
Right.
Who had a coach, and the coach was converted into 3 sleeping sections.
Yeah.
And they had space for a couple more of us, so we hitched with them for probably 2-3 days. to see us down to the. We wanted to avoid Nigeria,
Okay.
and we were heading towards Benin.
Right.
So we hitched from Agadez down to Niamey, picked up visas there, and then picked. And again, I think at this point we were back onto the public transport and took a train. And that was an experience, a third world train, or third class ticket, sitting on, again, I think they were like sacks of cotton or something like that.
Okay.
On this train, with hundreds of other people on the roof, hanging off the doors.
Yeah.
Sort of images you see in India.
Yes.
And the train would stop every now and again in the middle of nowhere, and there would be effectively an impromptu market where the locals would pop up selling food and water and things like that.
Yeah.
And then the horn would go, and you hop back on the train, and you head off. So from Benin we headed down to the coast to Porto Novo, where we stayed for a few days, and then hitched various rides with people over into Togo.
Yeah.
And stayed in the capital of Togo. And we actually, again, we were heading in the Lonely Planet guide, heading for the lodge where most people go, and some guide picked us up and said, "Oh, I can offer you a cheaper place and stay with us."
Yeah.
And he had a concrete or a concrete house, a door but no particular window.
Right.
Left our stuff there, slept on the floor on a mattress. Went out and around and about. By this time, we'd very much run out of money.
Yeah.
I had a Sony Walkman in those days, cassette player.
Yes.
Had my 12 cassettes with me.
Yes.
And I had, rather than having AA batteries, I got the D-cell batteries. I had soldered them together, wrapped them around with tape, and had 2 wires sticking off them.
Okay.
And I was picked up regularly in customs because this looked like some stick of dynamite or something.
That's your physics.
And a couple of the other things, physics, yeah. So something else coming in. I remember crossing, and it was probably one of the Benin or Togo borders, and I had some rugby shirts in there, and old rugby socks, and the customs saying stripes are illegal in this country, confiscating all of my clothes that they fancy.
Jesus.
And you can't do a lot of customs in those days because they are king.
Yes, yes.
So they pretty much help themselves to the luggage.
Did you have to get visas at each stop, at the overland borders? Is that where you picked up the visas to overland?
No, I think we had arranged, again, we're going back 30 years now. So we had arranged a couple of visas before leaving the UK.
Yeah.
And I think the Benin and Togo ones we had to get in the capital of Niger.
Okay. Yeah.
Hence the reason for going there. So by the time we got to Togo, we basically run out of money.
Okay.
Trying to live like the locals and live off what the locals eat.
Yeah.
Is relatively cheap. So I was trying to sell a Walkman locally, which is an attractive thing down there.
Yes, definitely.
Just to get some money for food.
Yeah.
Selling other bits and pieces to sort out an airline ticket to get home.
You were.
And it was in Lomé that I. Further north. I contracted dysentery.
Right.
And from local foods. I think that was up in Niger. And we had found a French Foreign Legion doctor.
Right.
And he prescribed Pernod. 3 shots of Pernod a day.
Nice. Is that? I'm
would
going to
kill anything in your stomach. And it worked.
Have you tried it since?
It was never a drink before.
No.
It wasn't one of my tipples before. But yeah, no, a pastis. I think I've had a few in France.
Yes.
Ricard, as they call it as well.
Yeah. I think it's good to keep in there just in case, isn't it? You know, just to.
Well, it does. I do associate it with that aniseed taste with medicine.
Yes, it's not my favourite. No.
No. I think Pernod for me is for medicinal purposes.
Yes.
Rather than recreational.
Yeah, just dysentery. Yeah, which hopefully we won't. It's not something you want to get too often, is it? Let's be honest.
No, exactly.
So the stars in the desert, when you look up, you said you were just looking at the stars. Are they as mesmerising as people say?
Absolutely. We unfortunately in this country have a huge amount of light pollution,
Yeah.
and you don't see the stars. But when you're out in a black desert, the sky is incredibly bright.
Yeah.
And a lot of the seasoned desert drivers, the trucks that carry cargo and things, actually don't use their lights at night.
Oh, it's that bright.
Drive by the stars.
Right. Okay. It's incredible.
And yeah, it is. There is so much up there.
Yeah.
And I have quite an affinity for the desert these days. We visit it where possible. We were back in Morocco a couple of years ago with family, and at the end of our longer Africa travels, lived in Namibia for a while.
Oh, okay.
Which is said to be the oldest desert in the world.
Right. Okay. Is it something you look back on with absolute fondness? Do you wish you'd gone to Australia, or was that adventure stayed with you and was something you really felt that was the right thing to do?
I don't. Going to Australia and working in a bar and drinking with friends, you can do that in London. Why do you have to go to Australia to do that?
That is true. Yes.
Getting out there, and it was a real growing up experience at the age of 18.
Yeah.
Being thrust into Morocco, having to fend for yourself.
Yes.
You're spoilt at home. You get your food handed to you.
Yes.
Now you've actually got to go out and find it yourself.
Yes.
Doing all the little things of one of us would. In those days, you pay for hotels by the person, not by the room.
Right.
So one of us would book a room, the other one would climb through the window. I remember getting caught doing that and having an argument about being charged twice. Sleeping under trucks in a town for shelter, and then being petrified that the truck was going to drive away in the middle of the night.
I can imagine that. Yes.
It's basically sleeping out under the stars. There's a certain the deserts are quite sanitized because the lack of rain and vegetation and things like that. So you can just put your head down. Yeah. In those days, quite oblivious to the scorpions and the snakes and things like that.
Yeah, that did cross my mind just then. Scorpions in the desert, but basically just wild camping. At the end of the day, that's what it is, isn't it? And
yes, and it is. In fact, we were there in January, so when we crossed from Algeria into Morocco, I remember snow. Sorry, the other way around, from Morocco into Algeria, it's snowing in the Sahara.
Yeah.
And that was quite surreal.
I think it's what is it? I think there's only I looked it up, and there's like 1 inch of rainfall in the year. I think in the Sahara, and it's like -6 to +40 or something. That's the temperature range in the Sahara. It's just a massive space, isn't it? And it's high as well.
It is, yeah, and we don't appreciate that in this country because we're an island surrounded by sea.
Yeah.
When you look at somewhere like the deserts in Botswana are 1,000 meters high.
Yes.
Which is far higher than anything we've got here. Yeah, and we look at somewhere like the Hogar Mountains. I desperately want to go back. They are beautiful. They need to be explored. The desert there is your archetypal desert.
Right.
And there are oases and things like that. But sadly, you've got the security issues in the south. Timbuktu's been taken over by ISIS.
Okay.
And they seem to. There's a trade route from that sort of Timbuktu or the Atlantic coast that goes straight across through Algeria, Libya, Morocco, Egypt,
yes,
into the Middle East. And that's why they've shut the deserts down in Egypt. Yes. I think it was a number of years ago, there were a bunch of tourists in the desert I think they were Swiss tourists in Land Cruisers. The Egyptian military mistook them and killed them all.
Oh dear, right, yes. You have to be quite careful going through Egypt, or going off route in Egypt still, don't you? I think you can still do it to a degree, especially the north. It's a shame,
I think friends who lived in Egypt and explored the desert of weekends left there probably 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Because the Egyptians have shut the desert down. You can travel down the Nile effectively.
Yes. And that's a well-worn overland route, isn't it? Down the Nile, into the Sudan, and then and carry on down. It's well mapped out, isn't it? But you can go off-piste if you want to.
There is, and I think you can do a lot of it on tarmac these days.
Yes, I think you can, yes. Yes.
And I think at a push you can do it in 6 weeks.
In a tuk-tuk, can I do it in 6 weeks? No.
No.
No, 9 months. I can take 9 months off. I think it would take me all of 9 months.
Well, we had a plan to do 9 months, and we took a year and a half. There's so much to see along the way.
You're listening to Stories of Discovery and Adventure from Adventures in the Tuk Tuk podcast, now available on iTunes.
2015, I cycled across the Gobi in Mongolia,
Yeah.
wearing tweed for a laugh.
Yes.
So dressed as an English gent.
Yes.
And, there we are. The locals are taking photos of us.
Yes.
Yeah, we're there as a tourist. We should be taking photos of them, but it was quite the other way around.
Yeah. So that's Mongolia's northern China, isn't it? So it's right. It's quite high, isn't it? Mongolia? Is it high?
Yeah, it is. It is high. Yeah. So we basically went into Mongolia and went along the northern steppe, cycling. Completely misjudged the height. So we started our cycling.
Yeah.
And the first day we cycled up 1,600 meters.
Okay, that's high. Yeah, that's.
That was a lot to do on a bicycle.
It was the altitude, because you really do need time to acclimatise even to that sort of stuff, because it just takes so much more out of you as well, doesn't it? Cycling at that sort of altitude until you acclimatise slightly.
And then it was sort of up and down.
Yeah.
But it's the vast expanse and the space. You can see your dot on the horizon. You think, oh, I've got to cycle this now, and it seems endless. And when you're doing an incline, you are cycling up for 3-4 hours, and you're going for a pass on a mountain. Yes. And you've got there because in Mongolia they've got little piles of stones with the prayer flags on there.
Yes, I've seen those.
Marking the high spots.
And you were camping?
Yeah, everything's wild camping. We basically flew out of London with a backpack, 11 kilos, which had everything we needed.
Yes.
Busy bags, sleeping bags, cooking and stuff like that.
Yeah.
For the time we were there.
Okay. And how
sleeping under the stars, very much so, in a busy bag.
And how long was the route? How many miles?
Oh, we did 250 kilometers.
Okay. Yeah, but if it's uphill a lot, it's
Well, up and downhill.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not lumpy. Should we call it lumpy?
A bit more than lumpy.
A bit more than lumpy. Not flat.
Mountainous, not flat. Mountainous.
What was the highest point? Do you know?
I think it was 1,800 and something.
Okay.
We got up to some hot springs, so that was quite disappointing. You cycle that way, and there's hot springs and a little tourist resort.
Yeah.
Call it a tourist resort. It's a concrete bath with some warm water in it.
Okay, that's.
But had little spa treatments next door, so it was nice to have a massage at the top of that.
I can imagine.
Really appreciated that. Slept very well after that.
Yeah. Sounds like a great experience to do. What made you say? What inspired you to go and do that? What was the idea behind that?
Well, the idea behind that was one day my son called me a mammal, and I had to ask him what a mammal was. He said it's a middle-aged man in light.
That's right. Yeah.
So that inspired, and it was actually sitting at work with colleagues and discussing this. I suppose a bit of banter in the office, and there were 5 of us, and we were like, "Oh, let's do something mad.
Yeah.
Let's do something different." My son's just called me a mammal. It's like, you've got to cycle somewhere in tweed. All right, let's do Mongolia for a laugh. And 6 soon dwindled down to just the 2 of us. And it came to the day we went into the travel agents, booked the tickets, and off we went.
It's sort of, you don't want to think about it too long, do you? You just got to sort of do it, haven't you? And otherwise.
Exactly. And actually, these days, if I go back to Hitchhiking Across the Sahara, it was a guidebook, host restaurant.
Yeah.
I didn't speak or to anyone at home during that whole time.
Yeah.
You queue up for 3 days to get a bus ticket. Camera was the old film cameras, and it was a radio. Yeah. I remember in Morocco, all the locals saying, "Oh, bad news about Concorde." Thinking, what? What do you mean? Oh, Concorde's crashed. Right. But it was the space shuttle, Apollo, whichever it was, exploded.
Yeah.
We were totally removed from the news and everything. Whereas organising the Mongolia trip, internet, everything. You can see everything you're going to see on Google before you actually go, which is slightly takes away the sense of adventure and pioneering. To the point where we had, the whole trip was planned. We had visas waiting, tickets waiting, bus tickets waiting, accommodation booked. We knew exactly where we were going, and we could pack this whole adventure into effectively 18 days. So from leaving Heathrow, flying to Moscow, 24 hours in Moscow, then flying to Lake Baikal to pick up the Trans-Siberian train or the Trans-Mongolian train. Do that down into Ulaanbaatar.
How many days were you on the train?
I think it's just a couple of days. You can do, I think it's a 14-day trip, but 14 days on a train, not my idea of fun these days.
No.
So flying to Lake Baikal and missing the most of Siberia is fine, and then picking up for the last couple of days.
Still an adventure.
And then a couple of people said, "Oh, you should raise money or charity and all the rest of it," but wasn't that interested in doing a blog. It was such a short amount of time, and so much to pack in, so much to see. There wasn't a quiet moment.
No, I can imagine.
But that shows you the difference between organising a trip these days and what we used to do before. Previously it was analog.
Yes.
Now it's digital.
Do you think it's possible to do a trip without a smartphone these days? Is it wise to do one without a smartphone? Do you think it would? Do you think it enhance it would enhance the experience, or do you think people are just too scared now?
Well, I look at when I did the cycling, we kept everything down to 11 kilos, and basically your smartphone was your camera, your tickets, your everything was in that phone. It was a challenge trying to keep your batteries for 7 days.
I can imagine.
When you're off grid, effectively.
And
we used it for navigation as well. You can download the apps and use it as a GPS too.
Yes.
So they are incredibly useful.
Yes.
But at the end of the day, they are convenience. So when I hitchhiked across the Sahara, I think we had map 956, which covered the whole of Sahara, and that was it.
Right. Okay.
And you swap books on the way, and there's no TV or news. And it had a Walkman to listen to music.
And what was on the cassette?
The Pros and Cons of Hitchhiking, which was Roger Waters, was it? Pink Floyd.
Yeah, one
of his.
Yeah.
There was Pink Floyd, The Wall.
Okay.
There was a bit of ZZ Top.
Okay.
I can't think.
No, but that's quality.
I think there was.
There's nothing wrong with those choices.
There's enough to listen to for 4 months on loop.
So, what was the soundtrack to Mongolia?
Taking a bus from Ulaanbaatar to the top of the northern steppe. Arkhangai was the area we went to. Soundtrack to that was Mongolian throat music. 8 hours on a coach with a video playing on loop.
Right.
With Mongolian singers and their throat singing.
Right, did that drive you insane?
I keep promising myself I'm going to do a little 5-minute video clip with a couple of the video clips I took, and also the photos.
Yes.
But the soundtrack to that will be Mongolian throat music.
Okay, I can't say I've ever heard any of that. Do I need to search it out?
You should.
Is it worth?
It's different.
This show is sponsored by Waterside Calligraphy. Beautiful writing brought to life on the page. Thank you to Neil for 2 great adventures 30 years apart. His biggest journey is still yet to be told. In a future episode, we shall hear how he travelled from London to Cape Town in Bumble, his Series 1 Land Rover. On next Monday's show, I talked to Tom Butterworth. He bought a Bajaj from Tuk Tuk UK 3 years ago. He lives in Llandillo in Carmarthenshire. I met up with him in August, just before the first Tuk Tuk rally and just after the first lockdown. So that's it, we're done for another show. Thank you for listening. I was asked the other day, why do I make this podcast? Well, that's easy. I get to meet great people with amazing stories to tell. Adventure, it's available to everyone, epic or big, small or micro. Adventures are possible every single day. See you next time for more stories of discovery and adventure. You're listening to Stories of Discovery and Adventure from Adventures in a Tuk Tuk.